Hi, my name is Vedran Drakulic. I'm the CEO of Gandel Philanthropy. Here to have a very nice conversation with Paul Wheelton, a philanthropist in his own right, but also an inspiring person that sort of shows the way in philanthropy for many others.
Oh, that's very nice of you, Vedran. However, I think it might be the other way around. You're more of my mentor in this, that you've been in this space a very long time. And for me, this is all a journey, and it's a learning process. And we've actually had some great learning journeys on the way, actually, as we've explored different things. Yeah, it's been a great time.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned it, Paul, because in this field, you sort of get to meet a lot of very different people and understand their motivations to do philanthropy, but also learn from them and hopefully share your knowledge with them. And you and I have known each other now for quite a few years. I can't even remember, to be honest, how we met the very first time. But what sort of triggered our interest was the philanthropic work and how can we do more and better philanthropy, which I think is something that you're trying to achieve through your own foundation in a significant way.
Yeah, very much so. I suppose the background to this and why it's important what we do and why we collaborate in that, it is the complex nature of what we're trying to deal with. If the issues that we were dealing with were simple, someone would be fixing it now. The government would be doing it, someone would be putting some money into it, and the problem would go away. However, these are very complex issues that need to be approached quite differently, quite innovatively in a lot of ways to actually get some results. We know in a lot of cases, a lot of things have been tried before and haven't worked. So the challenge of investing, and whether that be in time or money, into these social issues that are out there to make a difference is what challenges us and I suppose motivates us as well.
Yeah, that's very true, and it's very interesting you mentioned that because as we often think about the whole journey of social development, but also philanthropy, you have, if you will, almost like cycles where things can be tried and then not tried or tried in a different way. But how do you actually get some sort of movement? How do you get something to improve? We often talk about moving that needle in the context particularly of those very complex social issues. And I think one of the challenges for philanthropy in its role as the sort of catalyst for positive change is to find ways of achieving that. And one of the big issues that you mentioned just now is that collaboration. And we've done a number of things together. That is something that in a way is relatively new in at least in philanthropy in Australia. It's not an easy thing to do. I often say that it's very hard with philanthropic entities, foundations and trusts and corporate foundations. We are all different. We have different ways of operating. We have different granting cycles, different areas of interest. So to find something that kind of connects us where we can pool our resources, it's not an easy thing to do. But there are two lessons to me at least. One is that we can't stop trying doing that because we are, when we come together, we are much more powerful and much stronger. And we have to find other ways of extending that collaboration.
I mean, over my journey, I've sort of moved into the philanthropic space, and there's no doubt in the early stages, made some, my PhD in hindsight says I've made some significant errors in that. And that I suppose is coming from the heart, giving from the heart of what I think is, really necessary and pulls a heartstring and get involved in that way. And what I've found over time is you've got to, as you say, move the needle into actually fully understanding it. Will what you're doing really have an impact with it? The beauty of what we've been able to achieve in some of our things is the collaboration, because collaboration, there's two sides that are really important for me. A is the scale of what you can actually do changes significantly. So by two or three coming together, the quantum of what can be invested in it all right, is significantly more. The other thing is having confidence in the verification of the research that you're doing and on why you're doing. Knowing that someone else is also doing it and looking at it as well gives you a lot of feeling of confidence to move forward, because again, the complex nature of these is quite often I find I'm not seeing the whole picture when I have a look at a proposal and things like that, because my knowledge of the area is not strong enough. And so the fact if you're getting together with others, you will find the skill set is actually much broader, and the conversations that come out of what we should actually be careful of and where we could actually tweak it to get a better result is much improved.
Yeah, that's a point that we often look at very, very carefully. It's very often about that confidence, about understanding where you sit. I sort of often equate philanthropic research that we do almost to investment in the stock market. You know, you look at an organization and you investigate them completely, all the way from the board, their financials for the past few years, who is doing what, where they sit in the mix of things, if they are in a particular field, how they compare to other organizations. So you really want to try and find out as much as possible about them. But then again, there is that other element, which is, have they been supported by other foundations? And that's like when you're looking at a stock on the stock exchange, you're trying to find out who is investing in them. So that then gives you a whole different perspective and understanding whether there is confidence in that particular organization. And in a way, you're spreading the risk as well. If there are more partners there, we are all trying to work for the same cause. We can all contribute different points of view and different angles, and we can then hopefully help the organization as well to achieve whatever they're trying to achieve and create that impact in a better way.
I think there's a common thing in our background, and in effect we're businessmen, all right? Our background is we understand what balance sheets are. With that, my background is an accountant, I'm an entrepreneur, I've got different businesses and the like. But I've also had a 30-year involvement in not-for-profit boards and the like. And I think my success in that has very much been converting not-for-profit boards from heart boards to actually business boards, making them accountable, putting in skill matrices, actually getting the right people on the board. Because a traditional charity normally starts off out of an incident. So Aunt Martha's died of breast cancer, so we will start a charity for her. The people who generally join the board at that time are ones who are committed to it. They heart feel it, why they're there. Do they necessarily have the skills to actually do it? Probably not. And so the challenge that I've worked on and giving a lot of advice to boards over the last period is very much about, first things first, let's have a look at the board. Let's see what they're, and then let's have a look at your planning, what's your strategic plan, and ask yourself another question. Is there another not-for-profit there who is doing it better than you that is similar? And should you be thinking about combining with them to get some leverage in there? And that's a really important thing to do, especially in Australia. We've got over 60,000 not-for-profits there. It is very easy to start a new one. And we just see the recent thing of White Ribbon that's folded. Great supporters, probably had a good board. However, in a very busy space, a lot of charities trying to do the same thing, a lot of then for mixed messages, each charity going out trying to raise their funds in a similar space from similar people, and the message gets diluted and the results end up being fairly poor.
It is a big challenge. It's a challenge for the sector, no doubt about it. I guess the question there is what you referred to earlier, is how do you create proper not-for-profits that are actually also not-for-loss organizations, so that they operate effectively and don't lose money and then don't close their doors, but at the same time not duplicating what others do. Some are really good at that, others are not so. But the key issue for me is to kind of almost have a bet each way. I believe as well that there may be a crowded market in some areas in terms of charities, but also we can't just have 1 or 2 or 5 really big ones. That is a challenge then for the community and for the social sector. How do you properly address needs, particularly at the grassroots sort of level? But it is, I guess, what you said earlier, the main thing for the not-for-profits is how do you make sure that they operate effectively, that they have a good board, that they have an understanding of what their mission is. The challenge that I often see with organizations is their own mission creep. They are formed to do something very specific, and then over time they expand into other services that they may not necessarily be experts in, and they don't know how to do them well. But because there is a need or a demand from their clients, they go and do that, and then they sort of become much bigger or too big for their own good, if you will. How do you make sure that they stay within what they said that they want to do and do that well, rather than expanding more than is necessary?
Well, there's a couple of interesting points you raised there. I think one of our first conversations going back a long time is actually talking about not-for-profit and the terminology. And we both said at the time it shouldn't be called not-for-profit. It should be called not-for-loss, because it's actually not for the loss of the souls. All right, and that's what they're there. The mission creep is a really interesting thing. And one of the issues I see in that is that those that are reliant on government funding will keep changing sometimes what they're doing based on what the priority of the government and their funding is. And so I've seen some charities that totally change course and all this because they see a big bucket of money there that they think they can get that, and that will keep the charity going. And that's a flawed thing. You mentioned about the 4 or 5 big charities, which is then a problem to all the others. What's your view with the current government strategy of saying, hold on, we don't want to be funding all these, we actually only want to fund the top 5, because that's in effect forcing it into it, and these bigger ones become bigger. And I've got a couple of the bigger ones, they really concern me because you call it mission creep. I just think they're too unwieldy. And because of the complex nature of what we're doing, it is not just an administrative function. And I think there's some real potential there for problems.
Paul, you're right there. And my view on that, and this is my personal view, but we talked earlier about having that business acumen angle on charities. And as you say, we shouldn't call them not-for-profits. We should call them actually for-purpose businesses or for-purpose organizations. But in that context, my opinion on how the social sector should work is just look at the commercial sector. Governments are opposed to monopolies and monopolizing something. They provide market incentives so that there is competition. I believe the same should apply in the not-for-profit sector. You can't have just a few really big ones and then nothing else, because first of all, support at the grassroots level can never be underestimated. It's critically important that any country, but particularly in Australia, that we have those really small grassroots charities and community organizations that provide support at that really basic community level, literally within their own street, if not a little bit bigger within their own suburb. So you have to have, in my view, the ecology out there. I often refer to that actually in the context of small grants versus large grants. There are organizations that are, or I should say philanthropy organizations that are moving away from small grants because they are generally for smaller organizations. To me, it's like saying that in the nature out there, we don't need small animals, we just need the big ones. But if you don't have the small animals, if you don't have the ants and the krill and other tiny animals, the whole food chain will collapse. I believe it's the same with the not-for-profit sector. You have to have players at every level. The question is to make sure that there are not too many, as you said, and that they also stay on their mission rather than go into that mission creep. The challenge with government is that, in my view, I understand why they want to just support large organizations. Administratively, it's easier. Financially, maybe it is easier. But I believe that they should actually be fostering the social sector rather than directing it where it should go. I believe that the social sector, by and large, has it right. There are things here and there that can be improved, no doubt about it, but that's the case in every aspect of our lives. But I think that they should be more receptive to what the sector is telling them they would like to achieve and how they should be funded, rather than directing them, well, you will do it this way now or that way now. I believe deep down that the government is coming with a sort of right attitude. They want to provide support to, improve conditions in the society. But I also think sometimes they could be just a little bit more open to listening to what are the actual things that the not-for-profit sector is telling them.
Mm-hmm. It's one of my passions, of course, is volunteering, and being on the Ministerial Advisory Council for volunteering. And so we support some volunteer organisations, all right? There is not the same sort of ability to be able to look at impact and things like that. But what we really know is volunteering is so important at the community level, and especially in terms of mental health and that. And we've got this situation where we're all living a lot longer, all right? And we're retiring earlier, and you've got this whole time frame there. And there are things that people are just crying out, all right, to actually be able to support, to help. People generally have a good heart. They actually want to do something, but you've got to give them the opportunities to do it. Yeah. And there's not enough opportunities, so there's too many people being, stuck in at home, getting depression, getting, all sorts of other social issues therefore come from it. So investing in that, as I say, philanthropy, it's the love of mankind. It's not all about money. You're putting your efforts into something. So this community and volunteering and giving people hope is a real core part, I think, of, I think probably drives both of us. I mean, both of us have a background that's is not normal. We're not silver spoon in your mouth. I mean, yours is from overseas. So.
Yeah. Yes. Look, I guess one thing you mentioned, which is around volunteering, which is something that I have always been really passionate about. As you mentioned, I come from overseas. I came to Australia as a refugee. And then sort of made my life here with my wife. We are eternally grateful that we were given an opportunity. Not everybody gets that opportunity. There is a corny expression that if you come to Australia to live here or you were born here, it's like winning the life lottery. I really believe that is true. We are not ideal. Everybody has its own problems. Every country in the world has issues that they can do, things that they can do better, but this is as close to perfect as it can be, I think, anywhere in the world. So to be able to live here, to work here, to contribute and to give back to society, to me, is the best award that I could have. And I have this real passion to repay this debt of being given a chance at another life by coming to Australia. And part of that is about volunteering. You talked about living longer. Often in a lot of things that Gandel Philanthropy and Gandel family is interested in funding is not just about the issue or helping save a life, so to speak, but actually what's the quality of that life. And volunteering, I believe, has an incredible role to play in providing a very good quality of life for those people that are living longer. We know that we will not be able to work forever, but we can contribute in other ways. And the other thing you mentioned, which is music to my ears, that philanthropy is more than money. To me, philanthropy has never been just about the money. It's one element of it, but you provide your knowledge, your understanding, your connections, your time, your energy, your mind. All of these things are philanthropy, and volunteering in a way embodies all of them. The biggest challenge is that in my roughly 20 years here in Australia, I worked with Australian Red Cross, which has an army of volunteers around Australia, so very strongly volunteer-driven organization. to being now in philanthropy, where we support organizations that have volunteers. But I think that we, in a way, dropped the ball a little bit when it comes to support for volunteering. There are many organizations that are like umbrella bodies that want to foster more volunteering, but they are not properly funded. They need to be better funded and supported to create those connections, because there are volunteering opportunities over here, and there are thousands, if not tens and hundreds of thousands of people that want to volunteer. Sometimes they can't connect. And we need to find a way as a society to help them do that, because they will then be philanthropists as well. They're not giving money, but they're giving their time, their energy, their life experiences, their incredible work experiences that they had over the years. Obviously, that's for older people, but also for young ones. They can actually then go and volunteer and learn about life. So that's, I knew that you were involved in that particular government panel, but I think that that's really, to me, an untapped area still that should be funded and supported by philanthropy as well, and somehow also fostered even more by the government.
So one of the areas we're investing in is actually a platform for volunteering. And we're using two charities at the moment in Melbourne. One is Neighbourhood Watch, and it is to actually able to align volunteers to a thing. But it'll actually geoscope it right down to, you can put in, I'm in Box Hill, I only want to travel half a kilometre.
Yeah, exactly.
These are my skills, this is what I could do. So when we get proof of concept and all that, we really think this is something that can be rolled out right around the world. And with that, interesting, my parents were, they were £10 POMs, so they came out of war-torn London. There, no jobs out there, ended up in outback country, and I won Tatslotto. I was born in Australia, and have been so grateful for that. Didn't have any money to start with. I was the only one who actually got to go to private school. I was the youngest. My parents borrowed the money for that. Volunteering, always important. This is my 45th year of being the treasurer and auditor of the local church. So I was doing those things before I had any money to do it. But it was in my soul to be able to do that. And it's about giving back. It's about accepting how fortunate we are. And one of the things I think we've got to be so careful of now is the media and the news and social media is creating an image for so many people that it's doom and gloom. And I don't believe that's the case. I think problems have been going. What's your view on how we can actually we need to turn the switch off on some of these things, because I actually believe, what the Prime Minister's saying at the moment, our young kids are being scared by the climate argument and things like that. They're actually, not sleeping at night and things like that. Yes, there's issues and we've got to address them and all that, but how media portrays them now, how the social media, we've got climate rallies today, and we know that now that, the professional protesters are now joining in that. We hear that there'll be violence out of it. How can we switch some of this, or dumb down some of this talk, and let people know that there's a lot of good going on, and there's, and they can actually be part of the good that's going on. Because things, this is the best country in the world.
Yeah, it is.
There's no question about it.
Yeah. It's a big challenge, Paul. When I worked with Red Cross, a big portion of my work, both when I was in Bosnia and then coming to Australia and then going into the field with Red Cross, but also in Geneva, big part of my work was around media and public relations. The sad reality is that good news is no news. All media, including social media, thrives mostly on the negative news, on the shock effect, on sensationalist stuff, and that will continue to be the case. I guess the challenge will always be, how do you find some room and some space for good news stories and things that you just mentioned, that there is optimism, there is hope, there are things that we are doing right, and so on. I guess one of the things that stayed in my mind quite clearly a few years back now was there was a panel on the Q&A on ABC, with the audience being made up of only year 11 and 12 students from around Australia. And just listening to that particular Q&A and the questions and the comments those young people made simply gave you hope for this country. In a way, while there is a lot of talk around climate inaction or action, whatever you want to call it at the moment, and those sort of difficult messages that, you know, we are at the precipice and so on, there is still a lot of hope with young people. We need to find a way of fostering them to be positive people who will make positive decisions. I think that's a really important thing. For me, as a young person, you can decide to always just be negative about what's happening and be defeated by that, or actually say, well, maybe there is a problem here, but what can I do to actually fix it and create some positive action? Including, you know, one of the challenges for young people because of social media, but also in general, has been bullying and particularly online abuse. And we fund, or Gandel Philanthropy funds, a number of organizations that are trying to help give young people ways of dealing with that. And one of the big messages around there is, if it happens to somebody else that you know, don't be a bystander, be an upstander. Call it out, talk about it, say it's not on, say it's not right. So trying to actually create a positive action out of something very negative. And I think if we can find ways and avenues for young people to express themselves in that way and do something positive about it, it will be much better, rather than just simply pointing out what's wrong and complaining about it. You know, we know that there are issues in the community, in the society, in the whole world, but how do we actually do something? What are the things that we can enact that will improve that? I think if we can concentrate on that, we will all be better as human beings and as a society.
So two things on collaboration.
Yeah.
So it reminded me, as you're talking about bullying there, so I've had an involvement with Life Education for 30 years,
Yeah.
chairman and the like, and I think one of the first involvements was actually Gandel supporting Life Education. So Life Education see 750,000 primary school kids a year, and Gandel supporting development of programs in that which included bullying. So again,
that was a big one, yes.
This is exactly where it comes together. But another thing that we've had great joy in doing is a collaboration on the rebuilding of the Guide Dogs Centre out at Kew. Now that's a $23 million thing, and you and I worked on that, and quite uniquely, we raised the money in 18 months. There is no way, if there wasn't collaboration, that would have happened.
Yeah.
All right, so the likes of myself, Gandel, you opened doors then for Potters, for other philanthropy. We then took action of all of us actually going to the government and actually challenging the government about their support for it, both federally and not. We wrote joint letters from the three major philanthropic groups to the Premier. We went and actually saw the Premier. And that, to achieve that result in the collaboration is really, you know, a brilliant thing of achieving some things. And you know, we've done some other things on smaller levels. But that's probably the one that strikes me as where us working together has just achieved such a brilliant result.
I'm glad you mentioned that one, because it extended far beyond just pooling our funding. Pooling funding is very important, but we were pooling our connections, we were pooling our influence, if you will. We were pooling the minds of the people that were supporting financially as well to enact other things, to go to government and say, look, we believe in this, we've done our basic research, we've done our deep research, we've done all our due diligence, we know this is a good thing, you need to be part of this, come on, help. And if you have really significant, strong names behind an initiative like that, you know, you have the Wheeltons, you have the Gandels, you have the Potters there saying, you know, this is a good thing, the government has a much weaker case of, saying no. They see this is happening. We are not just asking them to foot the bill. We walk the talk, we give our contribution, but they have to be part of the picture. And they did, which was really great to see. But those sorts of collaborations are, I think, much more important. The other element there which was really great, and full credit to Potter. They actually supported the CEO of Guide Dogs to go around the world and see what is best practice. So what they're creating here now is really an amalgamation of best practice from around the world, different sensory areas for people of no vision or low vision. So we are supporting something here that will be probably world's best example of support for people who are struggling with sight to actually live absolutely normal lives just like anybody else, which I think is a fantastic outcome.
And of course, one of the other attractions of this project is we actually put revenue streams into it.
Exactly.
So instead of having here, yes, here's our handout for money, yes, they deserve this and everything else, but hold on, how do you actually keep this organisation sustain it without them coming to us every year with their handout?
Exactly.
So we came out with different things like dog-friendly cafe,
daycare
for dogs, vet clinics, an auditorium that can be hired out, all separate revenue streams. But more importantly, it wasn't on the basis that they had to run them. Because again, the last thing you want is this, you talk about mission creep, and all that. You don't want them to spend their skills. They don't have the skills to run some of those things. But should they be able to make some money and build something that can actually have a return to the organisation?
Exactly.
It's a win-win.
So they're the sorts of things that, we often grapple. I think sustainability, in general terms, to me, often is a real kind of catch-all for, well, we are not really sure what's going to happen, but we'll give it a try. It's very hard for any organizations to say that they are self-sustainable. But I think it's not about being fully self-sustainable. It's actually about having some income streams that are ongoing and that will always support the organization and give it an opportunity to then raise other funds for other things. Because they won't come to us, I'm sure, for something like that, but we might support something else that they want to do. They want maybe to pilot some other program or initiative that might help particular cohort of people. We would support that. But also, I think importantly, when the government looks at these organizations and sees that they have actually a portion of their income, 10, 20, 30, 40%, that is completely unrelated to support from the government, they see them as a safer bet to invest in them and to help them to continue doing what they need to do and so on. So sustainability is a big challenge for many organizations, but a number of them are trying to do it really well. And social enterprise that obviously, in recent years has been growing as a portion of organizations trying to, create some income has been really important. It's not an answer to everything, but I think it's a part of the answer. For us, I think as philanthropists, the challenge is how do we make sure that there is no mission creep, first of all. Secondly, that those ideas are realistic. But also the third one for me is how do we capitalize on what happens in the broader market. As an example, you might know this as well, Paul, I'm sure you know, that the government has now regulated that all these big infrastructure projects should have social procurement element, at least I think about 10% or whatever it is, to be socially procured, which is fantastic. And the corporations are coming on board and they're saying, yeah, we want to do this. But over here you have a sandwich maker that's a social enterprise that can make 100 sandwiches a day, but they can't make 5,000. So how we as Philanthropy can help them gear up to be able to make those 5,000 sandwiches so they can support a corporation that's building a tunnel or some other projects so that they can procure services from them. Or if it's anything else connected to, recently we supported a great example of a local organization that has a car wash social enterprise. And they employed people with disability to wash the cars. And they started very small, they got one local council in their area to allow them to wash their their carpool, sorry. So they're doing that. Then they got a couple of car dealerships that allowed them to wash their cars once a week or whatever it is. And they were ready to expand. And we started talking to them. So we funded the expansion because it's a mobile car wash. They need a car and they need to train additional people with disability to do that. On the back of that, they got contracts from Vic Roads, from TAC, from somebody else. Another council came on board and they are now going places. Apart from generating income for the organization so they can then support more people with disability, to me, the most heartwarming part is when you go there and see this young person or older person who is a disabled person who probably feels that they have been a burden on their parents all their life or their siblings, suddenly having a meaning in their life, purpose, and they are actually generating income. They feel incredibly lucky, incredibly fortunate, and incredibly proud that they're doing that. And that's what philanthropy can enact. Yeah.
Indeed. Another area I think we're passionate about is efficiency, and we're often talking to charities about what they're doing, and I'll talk to them. Are there some things that you shouldn't be doing? Should you be outsourcing? Should you? Again, I mentioned before about should you even be there? Should you be combining with other charities? One of the things I know that you've done with Gandel and with the Lord Mayor's Charitable is Collingwood Tech, which is just again a great project of a whole lot of charities there, one back end, right? One phone system, one computer system, and the savings of that to the whole thing of having a whole lot there is just, it's a brilliant idea, and investing in that was just a great no-brainer to me.
That is a great example. I guess the only downside is that we should do more of those because that, I think, is developing into something really incredible, where you have an arts precinct, which is also generating income, which is also allowing all the arts organizations and cultural organizations that are in there to have space at reduced rent to what they would normally have to pay, so that they can actually stay within the broader CBD area. They don't get pushed out by higher rents and so on. So it's a really great example. And again, I believe it was a great cooperation with the government, state government in this case, because they gave the building, which was empty anyway. So it was a combination of different partners, philanthropy very strongly, government, corporate supporters as well. I know that the board there managed to get a couple of really big corporates to come on board. And all these organizations are going to benefit, as well as create efficiencies because they have one back end, and also there are a number of spaces there that will generate income. So it becomes almost like a social enterprise. You could call it social enterprise on steroids because there are a number of them there. But it's a great model. I would like to see it replicated. I would like to see another 10, another 100 of those.
So I think this is probably something we could look at, again, collaborating down the track. If I have a look at what's happening overseas, you'll be aware of the company called WeWork, which is talking about that.
Very much, yeah.
And this has applied in business for a long time, and especially in the IT area and all that, getting people together in a collaborative space, sharing resources, all right, the trade-off or the advantages of being able to do it. Now, I know so many charities who have their own building, they've got their own board room. Guess what? It gets used once a month. Yeah. All right, they've got all these things and all that. We should be trying to get more of these into these co-working spaces and sharing these resources. And, maybe it's something that, philanthropy can be look at, setting up a few key ones around to really get the ball rolling in this space.
Yeah, that could be a good thing. And, interestingly, it's not that it hasn't been tried.
There are some small ones, but
exactly, yeah, and you have Ross House in the city as well, which houses now a number of organisations.
Berry Street
as well, similar. Exactly. So,
but this WeWork thing's taking it to a really different level.
Yeah,
and it's probably something Gandel are aware of because the top floor of the the Emporium, which Myer are about to give up, is going to be a combined workplace.
That's right. Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
There are trends happening in the business world.
Yeah.
We've got to make sure that the not-for-profit
and
world's
they
on
can
the
be
space.
translated into not-for-profit, as we know. So that's another really big area, and that's, I think, the beauty as well of philanthropy. You can invest in testing and trying these sorts of things and almost like prove the concept. We often talk about the fact that governments might be a little bit risk averse. Now, we are not sort of as philanthropy just for risk, but we could test a few more ideas and then see what really works and what doesn't, what really creates that return, that impact that we are seeking, and then go to government and say, hey guys, this is really great. We know that it works. We actually have evidence. We evaluated the whole thing. Maybe you should try this. And I think that's another really strong point for philanthropy, that we can lead the way, we can show how things can be done, and then hopefully others and government will follow.
It's so true, isn't it? Governments and not-for-profit traditionally are not risk takers, right? What's the most successful businesses or entrepreneurs in the world? Those that take risk,
Exactly.
right? And my success in business has been out of taking risk. If it wasn't, I would be the same as anyone else in there.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that in looking at these social issues and that is, it's really important.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I just want to almost like pick you on one thing that you talked about, which is about giving with the heart. I know that only recently my chairman, John Gandel, was talking about the families giving and how they do it. And in fact, he described it really well. And I think that's probably how I would look at it, if I was to describe that. He talked about a lot about how it's important to properly look at everything, how it's important that you make a very strong case for supporting something. But then he talked about that on the board of Gandel Philanthropy, Pauline, his wife, is there, and Lisa, the daughter, is there as well. And he was writing in some article talking about how it's great to have really good people on the board, where we make a lot of decisions and we make them with our head, but we also have people like Pauline and Lisa who help us ensure that we don't forget the heart.
Yeah, the balance.
The balance is important, and I think we want to make the strong case. We want to have a very robust assessment and evaluation and review process, but we also have to have a bit of a sprinkle of the heart. I think that's always important.
Very important. Yes, yeah. It's not, nothing's black and white.
True.
Is it? Right. And there's got to be passion in it to get involved because. And the choices are so broad and varied. So you end up saying, okay, we've had to bring it down like you do, because initially we were a shotgun approach. Bring it down to pillars of the important things that we want to support with that. But there's still heart in it. But it's a bit more robust in actually how it's going.
Yeah. And one of those, and I do want to mention that because I know you're very committed to that, and it's to great credit to you and Angela as well, that you took the issue of gender equality, and particularly women and young girls, and support for that. You want to say something about that? I think that's really great.
Yeah, so it certainly is a passion of ours, and I think it's come from, I've got 3 daughters, so and seeing that underlying discrimination against women here. But more so we saw it, we've been, the Bali Children's Foundation, we have 7,000 children over there, seeing how women were treated in that society. And a lot of it actually we didn't discover a lot of what was going on until 10 years plus into it. What we thought was happening and how women were being treated was not actually the case. All right, and serious disadvantage. The reality is in their society, the woman will leave the family home and go and live with the male, all right, when they marry. The attitude is, why would I bother investing in educating the girl when she's no longer going to be part of the family? So the labourers in Indonesia are actually women, all right? Girls generally don't go to secondary school in the areas that we work. and seeing that and seeing what they missed out. Again, we were involved in orphanages. We had 7 there. And we didn't understand why it was mainly boys in the orphanages. And we thought it was actually because, oh, listen, people look after the girls and, you know, they can help at home and all this. It wasn't that at all. They were putting boys in to get educated, to get an advantage ahead of the girls.
Yeah.
Okay. So starting to see that, and then looking in other areas, and you just see the great discrepancies that are out there in wages, in everything in our country there. So yeah, we're part of Women Moving Million, which is a UN-based organisation. The major, they don't tell you where to put the money. You commit to giving US 1 million to women's causes, women's and girls' causes. So don't tell you where to do it, but what they have is they've got a lot of tools that you can go and check. Say, has anyone invested in this so far? So you can actually find out whether someone's gone down that track and it hasn't worked, or it has, what were the learnings out of it? So this learning off others is a real advantage out of that. We support UN Women in Australia, so and that's starting to get some ground. So
that's great, That learning issue is still, in a way, a gap in Australia. Gandel Philanthropy supported Philanthropy Australia, in fact, to start foundation maps. I'm not sure if you know about that.
Yes.
But that's really trying to sort of encapsulate who is doing what, where, with how much support, what are the key issues, what are the organizations. And I think we still have a long way to go to learn about what happens in philanthropy in Australia, who does what, how do we do it. But also, you know, we are all happy to talk about successes, not necessarily about failures. We need to have both in order to not repeat those failures. So I think that's one thing that philanthropy can probably sort of strengthen going forward. And, you know, there are moves that are being done, particularly by Philanthropy Australia, to try and help with that. And there is the Better Giving Hub and Foundation Maps, and they are both great tools to find out what are the things that you can do, what are the things that maybe haven't worked, so that we don't repeat those mistakes and can, you know, really get maximum benefit for the community out of what we do.
I think one of the things we can both be really proud of is the journey we've been on with Philanthropy Australia. And they've come from a membership-based organisation to really being the peak body now. And the things you mentioned, the foundation maps, the giving hubs, the other things they're doing, the education they're doing, the philanthropy meets Parliament, all those things is really progressing really well. And it's come such a long way, and it's been on the journey that while we've been there, Sarah Davis there is just doing a phenomenal job in moving the dial there, which is just terrific.
And the sector needs that, you know, we need to have a strong peak body that can influence policy, that can provide advice, evidence when government makes decisions around, you know, what's happening in the whole society. So it's really great to have them there. I just hope that they keep going from strength to strength as they have been doing so far. So it's really fantastic. Paul, it's been a great pleasure.
As always, Vedran.
Thanks very much. Really good to talk to you. Thanks.